You always bounce back, Rachel. Sienna doesn't. That was the line, the sentence that split my world open, like a crack running through old plaster. I was standing just beyond the kitchen doorway that July morning, barefoot on the cold tile, holding a glass of orange juice that had stopped halfway to my lips. My mother, Margaret, was stirring eggs on the stovetop, while my father, Edward, leaned against the counter, his tie still perfectly knotted even though it was Saturday. They were discussing college decisions, or rather, deciding which daughter was an investment and which one was expected to survive on resourcefulness. I wasn't supposed to hear that sentence, but once you hear it, you don't unhear it. It settles deep into the spine. It alters how you stand. I was 18, just graduated high school as valedictorian, a 4.3 GPA, regional science awards, and a letter of conditional acceptance to North Shore Institute of Technology. I had done everything right, everything. But the scholarship only covered 70% of tuition. I needed help with the rest. Meanwhile, Sienna had gotten into the same university with average grades, a glowing essay about branding yourself authentically, and zero financial aid. Still, the decision was clear to them. She needs the experience, Mom said. She needs the environment to thrive. And I could improvise. I always did. I stood there, not moving, letting my juice warm in my hand, watching the sunlight flicker against the cabinet handles. That was the moment I realized love, at least in my house, was not unconditional. It was measured in potential, in neediness, in volume. Sienna cried when her phone screen cracked. I replaced mine with a refurbished one and didn't mention it. Sienna needed a MacBook. I typed code on a borrowed Lenovo with half the keys faded off. Sienna got enrolled. I got told, "We know you'll figure it out, honey. You always do." That summer, while Sienna shopped for dorm decor and planned her college reveal post, I worked 38 hours a week at the local library, shelved books until my fingers ached, and collected financial aid forms like trading cards. Every night, I researched institutional grants and emergency relief programs. I taught myself how to write professional emails. I sold my prom dress. I bartered extra math tutoring sessions for textbook discounts. No one asked me how it felt. No one asked if I was scared. Sienna glided through the house like a favored ghost. Her every sentence met with approval. Her every complaint answered with solutions. Dad installed her printer personally. Mom packed her skincare in a monogrammed toiletry bag. I used a canvas tote from a blood drive. My own room stayed half-packed for weeks because I kept second-guessing whether I'd really go, whether I could afford to believe in myself more than my parents did. The night before she left for campus, Sienna asked to borrow my noise-canceling headphones. "You're not going to need them in a dorm full of silence, right?" she giggled. I gave them to her, not because I agreed, but because the last thing I wanted was to be seen as bitter. When it was my turn to leave, 2 days later, with my suitcase patched by duct tape and a second-hand calculator, I didn't get a family photo in front of the car. Mom handed me a grocery bag of granola bars. Dad said, "Let us know when you're all settled." I nodded and smiled, the way people do when their chest has already caved in. Then I closed the car door, turned the key, and drove myself to North Shore. Alone. The sign at the campus entrance read, "Welcome New Scholars." I parked in a lot near the back, beside a dumpster, and sat there for a minute, breathing. Then I reached into my backpack and pulled out the sticky note I'd written weeks before. Just 2 words, "Earned on." I pressed it against the inside of my dorm closet door, right where I'd see it every morning at 4:30 a.m. before my shift at the student radio station. That was the first day of the rest of my life, and no one in my family even noticed I had begun it. The dorm room was smaller than I'd imagined. The window barely opened, the mattress dipped in the middle, and the radiator hissed like it had opinions. But it was mine, my slice of independence, built on bargain bins and borrowed time. I pinned the post-it, "Earned on," next to my alarm clock and set it for 4:30 a.m. That first Monday, I started my job at the campus radio station, reading public service announcements between 5 and 7 before my first class. No one else was awake. The halls smelled like stale ramen and floor cleaner. I took comfort in the stillness, in being useful. Classes moved fast, but I moved faster. I sat in the front row, took notes in color-coded ink, memorized formulas between tutoring appointments and student government meetings. I didn't have time to feel tired. I drank black coffee with powdered creamer and ate peanut butter on saltines. Sometimes I'd split an apple in the lab and pretend it was dessert. Other times I'd skip dinner and save the last $2 in my account for laundry detergent. My roommate, a theater major from Connecticut, called me the ghost with a planner. I didn't mind. Ghosts move freely. Meanwhile, Sienna called from her apartment off campus. She'd gotten upgraded to a private room. My parents helped with the deposit. She laughed about her demanding marketing professor, then spent 10 minutes describing the design of her new gel nails. "College is so hard," she sighed, while waves crashed in the background. She was on a weekend beach trip with her new sorority sisters. I was kneeling on the dorm floor, trying to get printer ink off my jeans before my 8 a.m. calculus review. When she hung up, I sat there in the quiet, wondering if hard meant the same thing in our worlds. Every Sunday, Mom would set up a group call. She'd ask Sienna how classes were going. Sienna would stretch the truth like warm taffy, mention a group project that didn't exist, a professor who adored her. Dad would laugh and say, "That's my girl." Then they'd pivot to me. "You're still okay with those grants, right?" Mom would ask, "We just knew you'd be so independent." I'd mention a research paper I was co-authoring on structural stress loads in steel beams, or a theorem I'd helped prove during tutoring. "That's great, sweetie," she'd say. "Now, Sienna, tell us more about that champagne fundraiser." Sometimes I'd stare at the blank screen after the call ended, my voice still echoing in the empty room, wondering if being strong meant always being alone. The contrast became routine. Sienna posted selfies from rooftop bars in designer sneakers. I scrubbed cafeteria trays for work-study credits. She got eyelash extensions. I refilled my shampoo with hotel samples. One afternoon, I found her tagged in a photo at a concert 2 states away. The caption read, "Manifesting abundance." I was manifesting a stable Wi-Fi connection so I could upload my physics lab report before midnight. But the silence wasn't just outside, it started creeping in. Friends invited me out, and I said no, telling myself I couldn't afford the distraction. I stopped calling home unless I had to. The few messages I got from Mom became shorter, more administrative. "Remember to renew FAFSA. Sienna's books were $600 this term. College is crazy expensive." Yes, it was. One night, after finishing a 3-hour tutoring shift, I returned to find a care package from the engineering department, a granola bar, a stress ball shaped like a gear, a handwritten card from Professor Linwood. "Your consistency is the quiet kind of brilliance the world forgets to reward, but never forgets." I stared at that note longer than I should have, then taped it beside the post. By the end of my first semester, I'd pulled a 4.0 GPA while working nearly full-time. No one called to say they were proud, but I'd stopped needing applause. I just wanted to survive, and maybe one day be seen. By my 4th semester, I had stopped asking for anything. I paid my fees on time, signed every loan document without flinching, and learned how to make a $12 grocery run last week. I carried my student ID on a lanyard tucked inside my coat, not for discounts, just in case anyone needed proof I existed. Some nights I didn't sleep, not out of stress, but because time itself felt too expensive to waste. It was around February of sophomore year when I started noticing the cracks in Sienna's performance. She called me one night in tears, said she was failing macroeconomics. I offered to help her study. She declined. "I'll be fine," she insisted. "Dad already called the department chair. He's going to talk to someone." 3 weeks later, I saw her tagged in photos at a St. Patrick's Day party 2 towns over. red plastic cups, a green crop top, and a caption that read, "This GPA deserves tequila." I didn't say anything. Then came the summer of junior year. I had accepted a grant-funded research position under Professor Linwood, working on structural load redistribution models in aging bridges. I spent 12-hour days in the engineering lab, my palms etched with graphite, my brain fogged by code. I slept in 2-hour intervals and ate whatever was free. That summer, I placed first in the Midwest Engineering Colloquium. Professor Linwood handed me a certificate and said, "You're not loud, Rachel, but your work echoes." The same week, a mutual acquaintance sent me a photo of Sienna standing on the balcony of a beach house in Emerald Isle. Sunglasses, tan lines, and a drink so neon it looked radioactive. She was supposed to be taking 12 credits that summer. When I asked her about it, she laughed. I registered and dropped them after the refund came. They can't track everything. I sat in the dark, holding my phone like it might crack in half. That refund, the one she used for a beach rental, was money my parents had wired for her tuition. Money they didn't have for me. I stared at the texts for an hour, typed a message, deleted it, called Mom, hung up. The truth was, I wasn't surprised. Mom and Dad believed in Sienna like people believe in weather forecasts. Even when it rained, they blamed the umbrella. If I told them she was lying, they'd just say I was jealous or worse, vindictive. And I wasn't. I didn't want her to fail. I just wanted someone to notice that I was succeeding. That summer, I won a departmental award. The email went unopened in my family inbox. I printed it and pinned it next to Professor Linwood's note. By then, my closet door was a collage of quiet victories, none of which had ever been acknowledged at home. On the last Sunday before fall semester started, Mom sent a family group message. Transferred another $4,000 for Sienna's capstone term. Can't believe how expensive Green Ridge is. Rachel, are you still good on your end? My end had become an assumption. My end was ramen, shift work, missed meals, and numbers so tight they squeaked. I stared at that message, wondering if she even remembered the name of my major. Instead of replying, I opened a new spreadsheet. Income, hours, lab commitments, deadlines. I added a note at the bottom. Hold steady. Because even if no one clapped, even if no one cared, I knew I was building something more durable than applause. And eventually they'd hear it. They'd have to. The email came on a humid Wednesday in late August. I was sitting in the campus library, finalizing my fall lab rotation schedule, when subject line popped up on my screen. Congratulations! You've been selected for the Chancellor's Distinction Award. I blinked twice. Read it again. It wasn't a nomination. It was real. An internal committee had reviewed 3 years of my academic records, research milestones, and work history, and decided to name me the recipient of the university's highest honor for academic resilience. It would be announced, without prior notice, at the commencement ceremony in May. I stared at the screen for nearly 10 minutes, unsure whether to laugh or cry. I didn't do either. Instead, I closed the laptop gently, stood up, and walked out into the late summer air. The quad smelled like cut grass and old brick. Students dragged suitcases up sidewalks, calling to each other across parking lots. The campus was coming back to life, and so was something inside me. I never told my parents, not because I wanted to surprise them, but because I knew they wouldn't hear me. A few days later, I received a text from a former lab partner who also happened to follow Sienna on Instagram. "You seeing this?" Attached was a photo, Sienna again on that same balcony, this time with fairy lights strung behind her, and a cake that read grad season baby. The caption, "Senior year, let's get it." I felt my stomach turn. I knew Sienna had been placed on academic probation last semester. I knew she hadn't registered for the summer credits. She needed to stay enrolled. I knew, though no one else did, that she wasn't a senior. She was a dropout in disguise, and she was using our parents' money to fund the lie. I called her that night. Are you actually going back this fall?" There was a pause, then a laugh. "Technically, no, but I'm taking a break. It's mental health, you know? I just need time. They wouldn't understand, but I'm keeping the robe just in case. I didn't ask who they were, because I already knew. That week, Mom forwarded me a receipt, $5, $800 for what she claimed was Sienna's capstone registration. She's almost there, she wrote. Just one big push. I sat at my desk in silence, lit only by my desk lamp, and tried to breathe through the ache in my chest. The same ache I'd had since I was 10 years old and watched my science fair ribbon disappear into a drawer, while Sienna's crayon drawing got a spot above the fireplace. I didn't reply. I didn't call. I just went back to work. I told myself this would be the last time. The last time I let the lie walk past me unchallenged. The last time I swallowed the truth, because I was afraid of being the one to break the illusion. Because illusions don't just protect the person pretending. They comfort the people who want to believe. And my parents wanted to believe in Sienna. They needed to. So I gave them silence one more time. But the next time, it would be the stage. Fall semester began with rain. Not the hard, punishing kind, but the slow drizzle that seeps into your shoes and spine, the kind that smells like cement and unfinished business. I had signed up for a full course load and a senior research placement with Blue Frame Structural Systems, one of the most competitive internships in the region. My day started at 5 a.m. with data modeling and ended at midnight in a lab echoing with fluorescent hums. I was designing sensor arrays for aging bridge structures, running failure probability tests while my classmates planned spring break. Sienna posted photos from a rooftop lounge in Charlotte with captions like #almost and #futuregrad. Mom forwarded her the family's Airbnb confirmation for May's graduation ceremony. We'll all be there to celebrate both of you, she wrote. I reread the message twice. Both of us. That winter, I was invited to present my findings at the Midwestern Structural Engineering Summit. I stood in a room of older men with gray ties and silver eyebrows and explained how real-time monitoring could prevent disaster before it started. I finished with dry lips and shaking knees, expecting polite applause. But they stood, every one of them. Professor Linwood whispered as I stepped down, "Rachel, you just changed someone's blueprint." And yet, at home, all I heard was, "Sienna's still trying to choose her capstone topic. Such a creative mind. She just needs a little time." By January, it was obvious to me that she hadn't taken a single class all year. I overheard her on the phone once, while visiting for a long weekend. "No, it's not real enrollment," she said. "I faked the course codes from the old catalog. Mom doesn't check." Then she laughed. A little too loud, a little too easily. I didn't confront her. I simply added another note to the bottom of my closet door. Let her pretend. I'll prepare. That spring, Sienna ordered a graduation robe from the theater department. The campus bookstore required proof of academic standing. She couldn't provide it, so she fabricated her future, stitch by stitch. Meanwhile, I submitted my final thesis on adaptive structural support systems. Professor Linwood handed me a sealed envelope and said, "Don't open this until May." His eyes sparkled. "You'll understand why." The weeks that followed blurred. Interviews, recommendation letters, thank you notes. My inbox filled with job offers and fellowship opportunities. I accepted one quietly, a position at Blue Frame with a relocation package, signing bonus, and a desk that faced the water. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell anyone, because some victories aren't made for announcements. They're made for arrival. All around me, the campus bloomed into celebration. Graduation gowns appeared in dorm windows. Rehearsals were scheduled, seats assigned. Sienna hosted a pre-grad vision board party, with balloons that read she believed she could in gold script. Mom sent her a new pair of heels with the message, "Can't wait to see you walk." The stage was set, but the script was about to change. It was nearly midnight when I found her. The air behind the art building smelled like turpentine and lilacs. Final projects had been set outside to dry. Sienna sat on the hood of a borrowed car, bare feet on the bumper, her robe bundled beside her like a costume that no longer fit. Her eyes were swollen, her makeup streaked. A yellow streetlight caught the edge of a stamped envelope clenched in her hand. "I thought maybe they'd let me walk anyway," she said before I even spoke. I didn't move. I just waited. She held the envelope up. The words "academic dismissal final" were visible through the paper. "It came in January," she whispered. I didn't tell anyone. I kept pretending. I figured if I could make it look real long enough, maybe it would become real. Her phone buzzed. 3 messages from someone named Amber, probably about the after party. She ignored them. They don't know Ratch. Mom and Dad think I'm graduating with honors. I even faked a letter from the dean. I finally stepped closer. "You're going to stand there tomorrow in a robe you don't deserve." I wasn't going to, she said, but now, I don't know. I rented the Airbnb. Everyone's coming. There's a cake. I stared at her. There's always a cake. Sienna looked up then, and for a second, just one, she didn't look like the girl who'd stolen my spotlight for 2 decades. She looked like someone drowning. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said. I didn't want to be the disappointment." "You are," I said softly, "but that doesn't mean you have to keep being one." She flinched. "Why didn't you say something?" I asked. "Why fake the whole thing instead of asking for help?" She gave a hollow laugh. "Because you're the one they trust. You're the one who figures things out. I'm just the one who makes it pretty. They don't want the truth from me, Rachel. They never did." I didn't argue. We sat in silence for a long time. The only sound was the rustle of spring leaves and the far-off hum of traffic. Finally, I turned to leave. "Are you going to tell them?" she asked. I paused. "No, not tonight." "Then when?" "When it matters." She nodded slowly. Her fingers curled tighter around the envelope until it creased. "I don't know what to do." I looked back once. "Then don't walk the stage," I said. "Don't steal the one thing I built without $1 of their help. Don't lie tomorrow, not when the truth is coming either way." Sienna didn't respond. She looked down at her lap, breathing shallow and fast. I walked away under the streetlight, my shadow long and sharp against the brick wall. By the time I reached my dorm, I already knew what would happen the next morning. The robe, the crowd, the shock, the silence that follows revelation like thunder trailing lightning. She still might show up, but this time I'd be the one with the microphone. The quad was a sea of folding chairs and half-wilted roses. Faculty in velvet regalia filed down the center aisle like a slow-moving current, their robes sweeping across damp grass, still heavy with morning dew. A brass quartet played something vaguely triumphant. My breath fogged in the air as I stood among the engineering majors. Cap tilted slightly wrong because the bobby pins had snapped. I scanned the crowd, but didn't look for my parents. I didn't need to. They were easy to spot, front row, VIP section, their faces lit with expectation. Mom wore her white ribbon sun hat. Dad's tie matched the school colors. They clapped as names were called, glancing occasionally toward the stage with unmistakable anticipation. In front of their seats sat an empty chair marked, "Honors Graduate Sienna Moore." I let the irony settle. She wasn't backstage. She wasn't in line. She was nowhere near ready. When they called the name before hers, I held my breath. And then, exactly as I knew it would, the dean stepped to the mic, shuffled his clipboard, and spoke with an unfamiliar tightness in his voice. "Before we proceed, we wish to make a brief correction. A previously listed candidate, Miss Sienna Moore, is not eligible for graduation and will not be participating in today's ceremony." The words landed like an unexpected hush, as if the entire crowd had forgotten how to breathe. A murmur rippled outward. I watched it hit my parents like a wave. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, her body stiffened. Dad's face drained of color, his shoulders suddenly unsure of themselves. Then, before the silence could solidify, the Chancellor stepped forward. "However," she said, voice clear and resonant, "excellence often comes from quieter places. Please join me in recognizing Rachel Moore, recipient of this year's Chancellor's Medal for Academic Resilience." It didn't register. Not at first. The name floated through the air like a spark waiting for oxygen. Then came the first clap, then 5, then 50. A wave of applause rolled across the quad, stronger than I'd imagined, louder than I thought I could bear. I felt my knees shake, my hands tingled, and still I walked. Not like a victor, not like someone proving a point, but like a woman returning to her own name after years of being mispronounced. The Chancellor placed the medal around my neck. "Your record is extraordinary," she whispered. "You carry more than just grades. You carry grace." I nodded, lips pressed tight. I didn't cry. Not then. I swallowed a decade of almosts and not quites, of being second in a race only one of us trained for, and let the weight of the medallion settle like justice across my chest. I didn't look at my parents immediately. I didn't need to see their confusion, their shame, the questions they hadn't thought to ask until now. I didn't want anger to sour the taste of triumph. But when the anthem played, when caps flew like startled birds into the overcast sky, I finally turned. Mom's mascara had run down both cheeks like twin rivers of disbelief. Dad's gaze was locked on me, not with pride, but with something closer to recognition. Then, from behind the stage, Sienna appeared. Late, out of place, robe clutched in one arm like a prop from a forgotten play. She didn't speak, didn't wave, just stood near the edge of the platform, half lit by a stage light, watching the moment she tried to steal unfold without her. We met by the stone fountain where graduates traditionally sign their names in chalk. My parents reached me first. Mom opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "Why didn't you tell us?" she whispered. And I finally said what I had rehearsed since I was 12. Because every time I tried, you were already clapping for her. The silence that followed wasn't painful. It was honest. Dad slowly took the envelope from Sienna's hand. "Read it." And for the first time in my life, I watched him see her not as a favorite, but as a stranger. "The money," he asked quietly, "where did it go?" "Clubs. Rent. Clothes," Sienna said, eyes glassy. "I thought I could fix it before it mattered." Mom made a soft, crumbling sound, part apology, part disbelief. I reached up, removed the Chancellor's medal from my neck, and held it level with their eyes. "This isn't just mine," I said. "It belongs to every night I skipped dinner. Every shift I worked while she bought shoes. Every line of code you never asked me about." Sienna's voice cracked then, raw and brittle. "So what? Rachel gets to be perfect, and I'm the villain." I turned to her, calm, unshaken. "I'm not perfect," I said. "I'm tired. But tired isn't the same as broken." And that sentence, simple, unraised, unadorned, was the one that silenced her, more than any accusation ever could. 2 weeks later, I boarded a flight to Seattle. No parents waving goodbye. No confetti. Just me, a duffel bag of essentials, and a folder of offer letters folded into thirds. The plane lifted into a sky so clear it looked manufactured, and I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't feeling anything, but because I was finally feeling only what belonged to me. I moved into a small apartment near Elliott Bay, 9th floor, facing the water. The walls were blank, the shelves bare. I unpacked slowly. On my desk, I pinned the Chancellor's medal beside a note from Professor Linwood, and above them both I pressed my old post-it to the wall. Earn dawn. Except now dawn had already come. The days passed quietly. I began work at Blue Frame Structural Systems, joining a team building real-time failure detection for suspension bridges. The job was challenging. The hours were long. But the exhaustion tasted different, clean, honest, earned. At night, I walked to the docks, watched the ferries light up the water like fireflies tracing new boundaries. Some evenings I wrote, not code, but words, poems scribbled on the backs of blueprints, fragments of a life finally lived in full color, a life that wasn't waiting for anyone to clap. Then, in July, I received an email from my mother. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs. She admitted they had mortgaged part of the house to fund Sienna's tuition, and were now trying to reclaim what the university would refund. She asked if I had any advice. The question should have hurt, but it didn't. I wrote back, calmly, detailed my personal budget, suggested they set aside what was left for retirement. "I'm covered now," I typed. "Take care of yourselves." I hit send before guilt could argue. That weekend, I took the ferry to Bainbridge Island, brought a notebook, drew a fan beside the words self-generated airflow, then added another fan beside it, labeled earn support, because maybe now the wind beneath me wasn't just mine. A few days later, Sienna sent a photo, her hammering nails at a Habitat for Humanity site. No filters, no hashtags, just a smile that wasn't perfect, but was real. Beneath the image, she wrote, "Beams don't judge who hammers them. They just hold." I pinned that too. Months passed. I stopped checking on their progress, not because I didn't care, but because caring doesn't always mean clinging. Some love has to be observed from a distance to be safe. One Friday night, I stood by my apartment window, chalk in one hand, sketching load diagrams on butcher paper. Next to the calculations, I scribbled, "Support is a verb." Then I drew an anemometer, my first science fair project, now fully formed. That's when it hit me. Justice wasn't the applause at graduation. It wasn't even the look on my parents' faces when the truth fell from the microphone like a verdict. Justice was the blueprint I'd built with no audience, no spotlight, beam by beam, quiet, relentless, enduring. And one day, when someone else walks across a cracked floor and wonders if it will hold, I'll be the reason it doesn't collapse. Not because I made noise, but because I stayed,